Nintendo has been in the gaming business for over 4 decades. Most of their biggest moments have been the launches of new consoles. We're going to be taking a look at the major games that launched with each Nintendo system and how it impacted the system's success as well as how good the lineup actually was. The NES didn't just launch with games. It launched with a mission: to rebuild the American home console market after the infamous crash of 1983.
When buyers lost interest in the first generation of video games about 4 years ago, Nintendo quietly watched as American companies quit the business.
That mission was spearheaded by one game in particular, Super Mario Bros.
Became 1,000 miles just for this game?
Yes. I've done 7 stores a day for 3 weeks now, and I cannot find it.
Designed by Shigeru Miyamoto, it took the simple idea of jumping over obstacles and infused it with expertly tuned level design, charming music, and responsive controls. The game's first level, World 1-1, has been studied for decades for how intuitively it teaches players mechanics without saying a word.
There's secret holes that you go into.
The game was packed with secrets, power-ups, warp zones, and hidden blocks, which gave it a sense of depth that arcade games simply didn't have. For many, it was their first real taste of gaming at home. It sold over 40 million copies, making it one of the best-selling games of all time. And while it didn't introduce us to Mario, it made him a household name, who now stars in over 200 games. Other launch titles included Duck Hunt, which introduced the NES Zapper and brought the novelty of light gun gaming into homes. The satisfying click of the gun and the mocking dog became cultural icons and would eventually be added into Smash, Ice Climber, you also probably know them from Smash, and Excite Bike were also part of the early NES experience, offering vertical platforming and side-scrolling racing respectively. But it was Mario who truly carried the console on his back. There were a few more like Wrecking Crew and some sports games, but these games aren't as well known today, and they didn't have lasting impacts. Released in 1989, the Game Boy was Nintendo's first handheld since the Game & Watch. The Game Boy would be supported for over a decade and would receive countless games, including Pokemon, which became another cultural phenomenon, like Super Mario Bros. On the NES. And fortunately enough for the Game Boy, one of its launch titles became one of the best-selling games of all time. Arguably one of the most brilliant launch decisions in gaming history, Nintendo bundled the Game Boy with Tetris, a puzzle game developed in the Soviet Union. Its addictively simple gameplay was perfect for portable play, easy to understand, hard to master, and suited for both short and long play sessions. It appealed to a wide demographic, from kids to adults, and even attracted a female audience, something not common in gaming at the time. Tetris helped define the Game Boy as a universal gaming device and sold millions of units worldwide. To this day, there are still new versions of Tetris and a big community of competitive Tetris players. As a new Mario adventure on the go, Super Mario Land was a peculiar but charming departure from its console predecessors. Developed by Nintendo R&D 1 rather than Shigeru Miyamoto's team, it featured a very different art style, strange enemy designs, and new gameplay mechanics, like Mario piloting a submarine. Despite its short length and somewhat awkward controls, it was a testament to how Mario could adapt to any platform. Alleyway was one of the others, and it's a fun game, albeit not the most original. When the SNES launched in North America, it launched with 5 games, but one of them was Super Mario World. It wasn't just a sequel to Super Mario Bros. 3, it was a showcase of the new 16-bit generation. With its colorful visuals, expansive map, and tighter controls, Super Mario World set a new gold standard and is still considered by many, including myself, to be the best 2D Mario game of all time. Yoshi, who debuted in this game, quickly became a fan favorite. His ability to eat enemies and gain special powers added layers to the gameplay. The Cape Feather introduced flight mechanics that encouraged exploration and creativity and would soon return with a new dimension. The game's overworld map, with branching paths and hidden levels, gave a sense of player agency and scale. And who could forget the music? Koji Kondo's soundtrack remains iconic to this day. Although the SNES didn't launch with many games, it soon saw the arrival of classics like F-Zero and Pilot Wings. These titles were designed to showcase the system's Mode 7 graphics, 2D scaling and rotation effects that simulated 3D. They might not have had Mario's lasting appeal, but they were technological showcases that proved Nintendo had entered a new era. The Nintendo 64 launched with only 2 games in North America, Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. But once again, Mario proved to be all Nintendo needed. Super Mario 64 did what Super Mario Bros. Did a decade earlier and basically created a whole new genre. It redefined what a 3D game could be. Nintendo wasn't just putting Mario in 3D, they were reinventing how players interacted with game worlds. The analog stick on the N64 controller was revolutionary. allowing precise movement in a way that had never been possible. Pilotwings 64 was a solid secondary offering, showcasing the system's ability to render open landscapes and simulate flight. It wasn't the cultural juggernaut Mario was, but it hinted at the expansive exploratory direction Nintendo was heading. The Game Boy Color didn't launch with a massive first-party game, but it did bring with it enhanced versions of existing hits. Tetris DX was a colorized and polished version of the original Tetris, adding battery-backed save functionality and multiple game modes. While not revolutionary, it was a solid and recognizable launch title that continued the legacy of the original. Unlike previous consoles, the GameCube launched with a larger variety of games, 12 in total, but the headliner was Luigi's Mansion. It was a bold move. Instead of launching with a Mario platformer, Nintendo spotlighted his brother. In Luigi's Mansion, players explored a haunted mansion, vacuuming up ghosts with the Poltergust 3000. The game leaned heavily into atmosphere, with moody lighting, ambient sound design, and the nervous green plumber. Luigi hummed along to the background music and shivered in fear, adding charm and personality to a character that never had his own adventure up until that point. Well, that is unless you want to count Mario as missing, but I don't think Luigi wants to remember that either. Other notable launch games included Wave Race Blue Storm, a jet ski racer that emphasized water physics and weather effects, and Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2, Rogue Leader, a visually impressive game at the time that demonstrated the GameCube's ability to handle cinematic presentation. The Game Boy Advance released in 2001 to follow up the massively popular Game Boy and Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Advance launched with 15 games, but you probably only know a couple. A remake of Super Mario Bros. 2, the US version. Super Mario Advance brought enhanced visuals, digitized voice samples, and improved controls to a handheld audience. The inclusion of the original Mario Bros. Arcade game as a bonus was also a nice touch. Though, some criticized Nintendo for launching with a remake rather than a brand new game. F-Zero Maximum Velocity. A true launch exclusive, this entry into Nintendo's now forgotten racing series used the Game Boy Advance's impressive Mode 7, style scaling, and rotation effects. It lacked familiar characters, like Captain Falcon for some reason, but was a solid enough racing experience. It showed that handhelds could be used for this genre. We later got Mario Kart Super Circuit, which while not as fast, it was a game I know many of you are nostalgic for. Castlevania Circle of the Moon. This third-party standout combined action platforming with light RPG elements in a Metroidvania-style adventure. Though it would later be somewhat overshadowed by future Game Boy Advance Castlevania entries, Circle of the Moon was a strong and atmospheric start for the system, showcasing how third-party developers were ready to support the Game Boy Advance in meaningful ways. The DS launched in 2004 and took the gaming world by storm. The launch library for the DS was pretty weak. There were only 7, and you probably only know one of them. Easily the biggest launch title, and it isn't remotely close. Super Mario 64 DS was a remake and expansion of the N64 classic. It added new characters, new stars, and touchscreen-based minigames. The game made a strong case for the DS's 3D capabilities. While the D-pad controls weren't ideal for 3D movement, it was a graphical improvement. Well, sort of. The resolution was lower, but the models looked more modern. Weird that Nintendo released this on a system without an analog stick or 3D movement control, but I loved this game as a kid and didn't care. Feel the Magic XYXX. This strange Sega-developed title, known as Project Rub in some regions, leaned heavily into the DS's touchscreen and microphone capabilities. The game was a collection of quirky, suggestive minigames wrapped in a bizarre love story. It exemplified how the DS could be used for weird, innovative gameplay. It wasn't for everyone, but it stood out in a good way. Asphalt Urban GT. Gameloft brought this racing game to the DS to offer a more traditional gameplay option. With a decent selection of licensed cars and tracks, it scratched the racing itch for players who weren't into platformers or puzzle games. When the Wii launched, it did so with a game that showed what the system can do: Wii Sports. Bundled with the system in most regions, Wii Sports was more than just a collection of motion-controlled mini-games. It was a proof of concept that helped everyone, from kids to grandparents, understand the Wii's unique control scheme. The games were simple: tennis, bowling, boxing, golf, and baseball. But they were addictive, social, and accessible. It became the go-to party game and helped the Wii break into demographics no console had reached before. I will still play this occasionally in 2025. It's so simple but never gets old. While Wii Sports got most of the attention, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was also a launch title, and it was a massive game. Originally developed for GameCube, it was ported to the Wii and enhanced with motion controls. It offered a darker tone and an expansive world that fans had been craving since Majora's Mask. Link's ability to transform into a wolf, Midna's mysterious storyline, and the return to a more traditional fantasy aesthetic made it an instant classic. Twilight Princess actually wasn't a launch title for some regions, but I'm just talking about North America in this video. Excite Truck and Red Steel rounded out the launch lineup, but Wii Sports and Twilight Princess carried the system's early success. Let us know in the comments if you played any of these. Following the massively successful DS, the Nintendo 3DS had a pretty weak launch library like its predecessor. The big system seller, Super Mario 3D Land, wouldn't come out until a little bit later. Pilot Wings Resort brought players back to Woohoo Island from Wii Sports Resort and let them explore in planes, rocket belts, and gliders. It demonstrated the 3D depth effect well, but was somewhat content light, acting more as a proof of concept than a must-have game. Capcom's Fighter was a surprisingly full-featured port of the console version, complete with all characters, stages, and a functional online mode. The stereoscopic 3D effect and simplified control options made it a flashy, accessible launch title that catered to a more hardcore crowd and held over 3DS fighting fans until Smash 3DS in 2014. The sequel to the smash hit Nintendogs, this pet simulator added kittens and improved interactivity through the 3DS's camera and augmented reality capabilities. This had a lot of appeal as a casual game. The Wii U's launch lineup was one of the largest in Nintendo's history, with 32 games. But quantity didn't equate to quality or clarity. The flagship title Nintendo Land was meant to be the Wii U's Wii Sports, a showcase of what the new gamepad could do. It featured mini-games based on Nintendo franchises, Zelda, Metroid, Animal Crossing, but lacked the intuitive appeal of Wii Sports. It was fun, especially in multiplayer, but failed to capture the public's imagination. I personally loved this game, and it made me want to get a Wii U after I played it at a friend's house, but I was already a Nintendo fan. I highly doubt grandparents are picking this up and playing like with Wii Sports. I'd love a new Nintendo Land for Switch too. Does anyone else? New Super Mario Bros. U was a solid traditional 2D platformer with crisp visuals and tight level design, but it felt unoriginal, especially considering how it came out the same year as New Super Mario Bros. 2. There was also Zombie U, a third-party survival horror game that utilized the gamepad for inventory and scanning mechanics. While divisive, it showed creative potential and tried to appeal to a mature audience. It just never sold that well on the Wii U and was later released for other consoles. Unfortunately, the Wii U's messaging was confusing, and the gamepad's role was never as clearly defined as the Wii remotes had been. Despite some great games, the system stumbled out of the gate. If the Wii U was a stumble, the Switch was a full sprint, and its launch title, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, was the reason why. Breath of the Wild didn't just reinvent Zelda, it redefined open-world gaming. It gave players a massive, beautiful, physics-driven sandbox and said, go. From the moment you step out of the Shrine of Resurrection and see Hyrule stretched before you, the sense of freedom is overwhelming. You can climb anything, solve puzzles however you want, and approach objectives in any order. The game's systems interacted in surprising ways. Lightning striking metal weapons, fires spreading through grass, temperature affecting your health. Critics and fans alike were stunned. It won countless Game of the Year awards and sold millions of units, making it one of the most successful launch titles of all time. It did also launch on the same day on the Wii U, but I think most of us experienced it on the Switch. Other launch games included 1-2 Switch, a quirky minigame collection that showcased the Joy-Con's capabilities, and Super Bomberman R, which brought classic multiplayer fun. But let's be honest, this was the Zelda show. I liked 1-2 Switch, but it was not worth the $50 I paid. This should have been a pack-in title. It was pretty much just a tech demo. As of now, the Nintendo Switch 2 is expected to launch with Mario Kart World as its flagship title. We haven't gotten a brand new Mario Kart game since 8, all the way back in 2014. But with a higher price tag at a whopping $80 or $500 for the Switch 2 itself bundled, Nintendo will need strong titles to justify the investment. Mario Kart World looks great, and I have no doubt it will be the most innovative game in the series. But dang, $80. We better be getting some outstanding games. There are going to be other launch titles like Hogwarts Legacy and Split Fiction, but these are both ports of games that came out within the past couple of years. Nintendo's launch titles have ranged from groundbreaking Super Mario 64, Wii Sports, Breath of the Wild, to experimental Luigi's Mansion and Nintendo Land. While not every launch has been a home run, each one reflects Nintendo's boldness and unique approach to gaming. Whether it's through genre-defining platformers, innovative hardware gimmicks, or massive open worlds, Nintendo has repeatedly reshaped the gaming landscape starting on day one. What are your favorite Nintendo launch titles? Did you grow up playing any of these games on day one? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment as it really helps us out. This has been ND with Game Domain.